Hello everybody. Remember them? This is spermy and ova from the fertilization video. If you haven't watched it, please go ahead and watch it. Now in that video, spermy adventured into the female reproductive system to find ova so that fertilization could be carried out and a zygote could be produced. But let's consider a few other probabilities. Situation 1. Let's say ova did not come, meaning that ovulation has not occurred. The uterus has just repaired and a new layer of endometrium has formed. So, assuming that spermy arrives when ova is still in the Graafian follicle, then spermy would be unable to travel any further because spermy would not know the direction. Without chemotaxis, spermy will remain in the uterus and eventually degenerate and die. Okay, so that is how our hero would have failed in his mission. Situation 1. Let's move on to situation 2. In situation 2, let's say spermy was late. So what would have happened is ova would have ovulated. The Graafian follicle would convert into a corpus luteum. The corpus luteum will then secrete high concentrations of progesterone. And this high concentration of progesterone will then enrich and vascularize the endometrium further in preparation for pregnancy. But since spermy has not arrived, what will happen now is the negative feedback of progesterone to the pituitary gland will cause the LH concentration to decrease. Without LH, the corpus luteum cannot be maintained, so it will shrink. Now, when the corpus luteum starts to shrink, the progesterone level also will begin to decrease. And in this way, the endometrium layer cannot be maintained. So what happens is, as ova travels down to the uterus, the endometrium wall will collapse and ova also will flow with the endometrium layer. So pregnancy does not occur. How about situation 3? Situation 3 is when the timing is perfect. Ova ovulates, leaving behind the corpus luteum, which will secrete high concentration of progesterone, in which the progesterone then enriches the endometrium wall in preparation for pregnancy. Now, spermy arrives on time. So they meet and fertilization occurs to produce a zygote. Now, based on our explanation for the menstrual cycle, we know that eventually the high concentration of progesterone will actually cause negative feedback to the pituitary gland, causing the LH concentration to decrease, which eventually causes the corpus luteum to shrink, and this will decrease the progesterone concentration. So that will actually lead to the sloughing off or breakdown of the endometrium layer. So now, if that were to happen, what will happen to the poor zygote? Now, that's what I am planning to explain in today's video. Hi, I'm Vignesh from BioWorld, and today's syllabus will cover the process of implantation as well as the roles of hormones in pregnancy. So come join me. Let us relook the perfect timing situation. Now, based on our understanding of the menstrual cycle, we know that around the 24th day, the corpus luteum will begin to shrink, and this will cause the endometrial layer to collapse, leading to menstruation. So, how is it that once a female is pregnant, menstruation can stop? What is so special about this zygote? Well, you see, within 6 hours of zygote formation, the zygote will begin to synthesize a hormone called HCG, human chorionic gonadotrophin. And this hormone can carry out similar functions as LH. Let's recollect what LH can do. LH can carry out 3 tasks. The first is to cause ovulation to occur. Second is to convert the Graafian follicle into a corpus luteum. And third, to stimulate the corpus luteum to secrete progesterone. So, HCG, you see, cannot do ovulation, neither can it convert a Graafian follicle into a corpus luteum, but it can maintain the corpus luteum for a period of 3 months. HCG can also stimulate the corpus luteum to secrete high concentrations of progesterone. So in this way, for the next 3 months, the endometrial layer will continue to be thickened and enriched. This is very suitable for the development of the zygote, which we will continue to discuss through the process of implantation. Now you see that this hormone HCG is synthesized by the zygote. So this hormone will only be present in a pregnant woman and will be absent in a woman who is not pregnant. So the presence of this hormone is the basis of a pregnancy test kit. Let's carry on to discuss implantation. The first stage leading to implantation is called cleavage. Cleavage involves the process of mitosis, where the single unicell zygote will begin to divide into a multicellular structure called a blastocyst. This process actually takes 1 whole week to occur, where the zygote, which has become a blastocyst, will travel along the fallopian tube to the uterus. Now this will continue on to the second step. The second step is implantation, where the blastocyst will arrive at the uterus. Here, the blastocyst can be affected by gravity, where it can continue to move down and out of the uterus. But then, that will lead to loss of pregnancy. So what the blastocyst will do at the endometrium is it will start to divide its cells and extend it to form trophoblasts. And then you see these trophoblasts will begin to secrete enzymes. These enzymes are proteolytic enzymes, meaning that they can break down protein. So what these trophoblasts can do now is it will start to digest the proteins in the endometrium, and in this way it will help the blastocyst to burrow. The word burrow here means like dig into the layer of endometrium so that it is inside the endometrium. So that is the concept of implantation. The blastocyst is not just sticking onto the endometrium, but it is planted inside the endometrium. So now the structure that we called a blastocyst is called an embryo. The woman will now carry on with her pregnancy for the next 36 weeks. The 36 weeks can be divided into 3 trimesters, where each trimester is made up of 3 months. Throughout her first trimester, the zygote and the embryo will secrete the hormone HCG, which helps to maintain the corpus luteum for 3 months. In that 3 months, the corpus luteum will be maintained to secrete high levels of progesterone and estrogen. Now 3 months will pass. So then what happens? Because after 3 months, the corpus luteum will shrink. So that would mean in the absence of a corpus luteum, the progesterone and estrogen levels will begin to drop. And this will cause the endometrium layer to collapse and loss of pregnancy. But that does not happen. So let's see how this is avoided. Let's look at this graph. As mentioned, by the first trimester, the HCG levels will begin to decrease. So as we know, when HCG decreases, corpus luteum will degenerate and the progesterone and estrogen concentration should decrease. But strangely, you see, after the first trimester, the estrogen and progesterone levels seem to be increasing further. How is that? Let me explain. After the first trimester, the uterus will actually form a placenta. The placenta then will begin to secrete a number of hormones. Not only does it secrete progesterone and estrogen, it also secretes hormones such as relaxin, prostaglandin, and HPL, which I will introduce shortly. So you can see the size of the placenta is so much bigger than the size of a corpus luteum. So naturally, it can synthesize far more progesterone and estrogen. So now, what was formerly the embryo, once it is inside the placenta, it will be called a fetus instead. Let's now discuss the role of each hormone. The hormone progesterone, which is initially synthesized by the corpus luteum, then later synthesized by the placenta, will continue to carry out the same functions it did during menstrual cycle. That is to maintain the thickness of endometrium. During the menstrual cycle, it was maintaining the thickness of the endometrium for implantation. But now that the woman is already pregnant, progesterone will be maintaining the thickness of the endometrium to help develop the placenta later. The high concentrations of progesterone will continue to inhibit FSH and LH so that no new follicles develop in the ovary and no ovulation occurs. So this way, another pregnancy is avoided. Besides these functions, progesterone will also stimulate the milk glands so that the breast can enlarge and contain milk once the baby is born. Presently, the milk glands are stimulated, but they are not synthesizing milk. Progesterone also will inhibit contraction of uterus. So in this way, the uterus can expand to give space for the developing fetus. So this is the reason why in the first and second trimester as well as early third trimester, progesterone levels must remain high so that the uterus does not contract and the fetus remains safe in the uterus. Finally, the progesterone also stimulates secretion of mucus at the cervix to prevent any infection entering the uterus and endangering the fetus. Let's move on to the function of estrogen next. Estrogen's role is significant at the uterus and at the cervix. Estrogen will synthesize three products. Firstly, a receptor that is sensitive to the hormone oxytocin. This hormone is not present until the female wants to give birth, because the hormone oxytocin is the hormone that stimulates muscle contraction during birth. Secondly, estrogen will synthesize a protein called connections. And these proteins are found in the uterus wall, and they enable contraction of uterus during childbirth. So you can see that the hormone oxytocin will arrive at the uterus, and the uterus becomes the target organ because of the receptors produced by the estrogen. Then the oxytocin hormone will stimulate these connection proteins to contract so that childbirth can start. Now, as the fetus is being pushed out through the cervix, the wall of the cervix will have to open up. So for that, estrogen will actually synthesize enzymes that will slowly break down the collagen in the cervix area. So in this way, the cervix will become more flexible over time. So you can see that this effect of estrogen is a slowly progressing effect over the 9 months, so that in the end it will help in the uterine contraction during childbirth. Another term for childbirth is parturition. So this is also the reason why estrogen levels must always be lower than progesterone, so that childbirth does not occur prematurely. Next, we go to the other three hormones synthesized by the placenta. The next hormone is prostaglandin, which is a hormone that stimulates uterine contraction. So you see, estrogen stimulates uterine contraction, oxytocin stimulates uterine contraction, and also prostaglandin. The three hormones cooperate to cause a powerful muscle contraction that helps push the baby out during childbirth. Now, for the baby to travel out of the mother's body, the baby not only has to pass through the cervix, which has already been made flexible by estrogen, but it also has to pass through the pelvic girdle. Now, this pelvic girdle is a bone structure which is hard, but by the presence of this hormone relaxin, the hormone will slowly relax the ligaments that are holding the bones together. So that is why throughout the 9 months of pregnancy, the mother's hip will slowly expand, so that there is more space for the development of the fetus and eventually for the passing of the baby out through the woman's system. Finally, we have the human placental lactogen, HPL, which is a hormone that is necessary for both fetus and mother. For the fetus, this hormone helps in the development of the bone structure of the fetus, whereas for the mother, it helps in the development of the breast, just like what progesterone does. So, from this, you can see there is a lot of coordination between the hormones to prepare the mother and the fetus for birth. We have concluded our discussion on implantation as well as the hormones in pregnancy. Next video will be about how from a unicellular zygote we became a multicellular blastocyst and eventually an organism. So until then, bye bye.